Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, we have a special guest today. Our Mershman Seeds meteorologist, John Feldt, talks about our weather outlook for the next 2 weeks going into planting season. Ben reviews current soil temperatures and planting depth. Joe had an exciting radio interview with Tom Vilsack, United States Secretary of Agriculture. To hear the full interview, it can be found in the link below or on our website.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe, Season 3, Episode 34. Today we have Turk and Ben and a special guest, which I'll have Ben introduce. Go ahead, Ben.
Yes, so today we have Mr. John Feldt. He's our Mershman Seeds meteorologist. He's in charge of Blue Water Outlook, and I kind of brought him on today. I wanted him to talk about what the next 2 weeks is going to bring. The crop insurance planting date for the state of Iowa, the earliest planting date is April 11th. In our southern Illinois area, it's April 1st, and in our southern Missouri area, it is probably already happened by now. I think it's the last week of May, week of March.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go ahead and let John talk about what the next 2 weeks is going to bring for moisture, temperature, and what his thoughts are. So John, take it away.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. Nice to talk with you again. I think each weekend when I do my briefings, I'm always talking to a number of Mershman clients, and I want to talk a little bit today about some things on my mind about spring. This time of year, as you know, there's a whole bunch going on. So let's get started and talk about a little bit about some of the things I'm looking at. And I wanted to start off with this first slide here. This is sort of the beginning of spring. This is where the first leaves have blossomed or beginning to work out. And you can sort of see areas in red are where it's progressing faster than normal. Areas of blues where it's cold. I find this sort of interesting. Remember that February cold snap? I don't think we've forgotten it yet. That really slowed things down, but now it's coming full speed ahead. So we're progressing with spring. Now you might say, where's the action been so far this spring? And you know, you've heard of all the severe storms, and this is what we just had yesterday, tornadoes around Birmingham. And it's because this jet stream, this southern branch of the jet stream has been very, very active. And we've have the coloring shades here indicate wind energy. And you see that's generally south of the Corn Belt. So we haven't had a whole lot of severe storms yet. It's all been down to the south. Now, if you look at where some trouble spots are, this is the last 14-day departure from normal from rainfall. And areas in purple are where there's been an excess of rainfall. So parts of eastern Nebraska here, small parts of Kansas, Missouri, and this little small part of Illinois here. This has been 4 inches or more excess rainfall in the last 2 weeks. So as far as early field work goes, there's probably going to be some spotty problems in these areas, especially here in Nebraska. But if you look at the rest of the Corn Belt here, it really is not too bad. It's in decent shape. There's some typical, spots right after some rain where there's problems. But overall, I think we're in pretty good shape. Matter of fact, I'd like to see, I say this a lot, I'd like to see a little bit extra. So like right in here, this green, this is an inch or two, or about a half inch to an inch above what's normal. I like that because I always worry about drought later in the season. Okay, so what are we looking at here? Well, you've probably heard me talk, or you've probably heard about La Nina, equatorial Pacific, cooler than normal temperatures, and this is the type of pattern we get. So, just from a La Nina, what we might be concerned about is the eastern Corn Belt from maybe Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, being unusually wet, and that might be where we have some issues. On the other hand, the western Corn Belt from Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, western parts of those areas in particular, that could be on the dry side. So that's sort of the big picture of what we're looking at for perhaps the big picture spring conditions. Okay, so let's dig into the short term here because you are concerned about the next couple weeks here. And what we have here, this is the first weekend rain event, and we still have that active southerly jet stream. So that's going to bring parts of Kentucky and Tennessee with some more heavy rain, especially Tennessee. But if we look up closer into the core of the Corn Belt, just moderate rain. So nothing all that significant, maybe a half inch of spotty 1 inch amounts of rain. We just don't see much. It looks like it's really that southern branch that's the hot spot right in here. Now, what's interesting here is we get beyond this weekend rain. Let's take a look at the 6 to 10 day and the 8 to 14. And we're setting up for some, perhaps a dry period here, 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 with below normal precipitation. So I looked at the models right before the briefing, and it does look like when I'm saying that doesn't mean no rain, but it does mean below normal precipitation. And also the possibility of some warmer temperatures settling in, especially in week 2. So we could be getting some real favorable as far as field opportunities to get in there, but not so favorable if you're looking for more rain. And matter of fact, I'm not a big fan of the week 3 to 4 outlook because there's a lot of uncertainty in here, but this is the week 3 and 4, and this is below normal. So if this works out, after this weekend rain, we could be getting in a fairly prolonged period of below normal precipitation. Now, I want to talk a little bit about drought and a little bit about flood. Let's talk about drought first. And I haven't talked about drought for a while, but I did want to point out that 20% of the Corn Belt right now, our corn production areas, are within some degree of drought, as shaded in the red here. So I'm probably going to be talking a little bit more about the western and northwestern Corn Belt being in drought. And here's the forecast for the next several months. And this area of light brown here, I guess, that's saying it's expected to expand in these areas here and persist. So parts of the western Corn Belt, possibility of that drought and improvement in a few spots here. Now that's drought. Let's talk about flood. And as you know, in spring, we always get some degree of flooding, and parts of the lower Ohio, middle Mississippi is in some degree of flood, which is minor flooding, is the orange. Yellow is high within bank. But the outlook calls for, generally speaking, a below normal risk for spring flooding, especially compared to what we've seen the last couple of years. And matter of fact, just these areas of red is where we see the possibility of perhaps some isolated minor flooding. So on the Mississippi, in this region here, mostly minor flooding this year. I don't see a big deal at the current time. And finally, the last slide I wanted to show here is just the April outlook, and it sort of reinforces this above normal type temperature pattern and generally near normal precipitation, except for dry in the west. Now, I think the overall trend here, what we've seen, and the reason I said earlier was I like to see a surplus of some spring rain or coming out of the winter season, is because the summer temperature trends are above normal. And if that occurs, we're more likely to dry out those soils. And that's why I like to see us starting with a bit of insurance as far as soil moisture. So that's sort of a briefing, I guess, in summary, some weekend rain east and south of the Corn Belt. And after that, we could go into a prolonged period of below normal precipitation. Not no precipitation, and not some spots may be getting significant. For the most part, the overview looks like I don't see anything extremely wet, and I see a higher probability of below normal rainfall. So that's a quick briefing, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Well, John, it looks like you just wrote a perfect prescription for planting this spring. So I think farmers are going to be looking forward to that happening, hopefully. I don't have any other additional questions. I follow your weekly briefings, and I've signed up, and we have the link on our website and on Cup of Joe to sign up. I encourage you to sign up to John's daily forecast and weekly briefing. It's awesome. Plus, John, you'll even take emails, won't you?
I do. I occasionally get something. I had a grower in eastern Nebraska who's concerned about the rain, just emailed me about a week ago about a little bit more site-specific information. So I'm glad to do that as well.
What could be better than that, to have your own personal meteorologist on your staff and only an email away? And we sure appreciate everything you do weekly and daily. It's a great help to our farmers and for them to make plans. I know I totally plan our operation of our company based on your weekly briefings, because I know if we're going into a cold period or a wet period or a dry period, there's certain things that need to be done, and we plan accordingly, and I found you to be very accurate.
Well, great. I'm glad to be of help.
Okay, thanks, John. We appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks, John.
Well, thanks, Ben, for inviting John. I'm sure our farmers will find his forecast encouraging. That's always good. You like to get things done on time, and it looks like we're headed that way. So what else do you have for us today, Ben?
I wanted to give a little bit of a brief update from Thursday soil temps from Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri. And we're going to start with a 4-inch minimum soil temp is how Illinois tracks there. So as of Thursday, the north was 41 degrees, the central region was 45 degrees, and the south was 52 degrees. Those are going to be progressing, as John talked about, in the warmer week 2 here. We're going to see some 70-degree soil temps, so that's really going to drive those soils into the mid-50s, which is ideal for planting. For Iowa, as of Thursday, 4-inch average soil temp. The northwest portion of the state was still fairly cold at 36-degree 4-inch soil temp. If you go north central, it's 44. The central portion of the state's 44, and our southeast Iowa, south central was about 45, covered the majority of the counties. And for Missouri, they do a 2-inch minimum soil temp that I'm pulling off of here in the northern portion, which is 45, which matches southern Iowa. The central portion of the state around St. Louis was about a 50-degree soil temp at 2 inches for a minimum, and the south was 54. I added in the high as of Thursday for southeast Missouri was 74 degrees for a high. So if you average that out, they're probably running for an average in the mid-60s. So
well, if you don't have your planter out and you've got it hooked up and tuned up, you better get on it sounds like.
Yep. And I was looking at our forecast and what he's talking about. We'll see low 70s, not this coming Monday, but the following Monday. So the moisture that we're getting right now is going to dry out fairly quickly, and it's going to, if John is normally very accurate, following what he says, we could have ideal soil conditions coming up right at our earliest plant period. So
peak timing.
Correct.
So it's kind of fun when farmers have a spring where they don't have to have it all done in 2 days. In other words, they can spread that planting out, spread the risk out, and get into some perfect conditions. So we'll see if that works out.
Yep, and we've done a little bit of meteorologist work before, and it's ended up snowing after some of my predictions. So we brought John on this year.
You covered your rear end, huh?
Yep.
Okay. Turk, what do you have for us today?
I just wanted to follow up and say I agree with you, Joe. The people got a week, maybe 2, to get that planter fine-tuned, hooked up, and ready to go. And I think you want to be ready to go this year, get that crop put in, because if we do get into those dry conditions later in the year, that early planting will be key. So
I would agree, and we've talked about this internally here over the last couple of weeks about how important your planter is. It's probably the most important device that you have on your farm, piece of machinery you have on your farm, because if you don't plant the seeds at the proper depth, particularly corn, and what is the proper depth for corn, Ben? What would you like to see?
2 1/4 is what a lot of people will call ideal. I always push a little bit deeper than that just because we can cover up some errors. If we're at 2 1/2, it's not going to hinder corn. Even 2 3/4 isn't going to hinder how the corn plant comes up out of the ground. So if you go a little bit deeper, that gets your nodal roots set in a little bit deeper. They're not going to be shallow where they may dry out in the top 1/4 inch or top 1/2 inch. So a little bit deeper is the consistent route that I usually push.
So really, it's your first step to hedge against drought is to plant a little deeper, isn't it?
Correct.
And that planting depth also gives a more stable environment for that seed, because shallow planting gets those cold snaps and warm snaps drying out too quick, or that ambitional chilling that could happen. So it doesn't look like we're going to have that this year, but that I'd like to see, like you said, Ben, that deeper planting gives you a more stable environment for that seed to get off and running.
I think it helps with seed to soil contact too. So
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of advantages about getting that corn placed deep and getting that planter set just right.
So you have to, when you dig up your kernel, you want to compact that ground with your foot.
Yep.
And then take the air out of it and see exactly how deep you are. What about soybeans? How deep should you be planting soybeans?
For early planted soybeans, usually 1 inch to 1 1/4 gets you about where you need to be. As we get later, we typically push a little bit deeper because we're chasing moisture. But I don't have a problem with 1 inch, 1.5 all day long.
Especially in no-till.
Correct.
If you're working the soil and you got some hot temperatures coming, you might want to push it just a little deeper.
Yep.
So the other thing I got, Joe, is the next week, or the March 31st is going to be the grain stocks and prospective planning reports, and markets kind of stabilized this week a little bit, and it looks like, and we've had some volatility, but toward the end of the week they kind of settled down, and look for more volatility and more fireworks after that report comes out next week, one way or the other.
I've been reading it said that this report could energize the bulls again. Mm-hmm. So everybody's on pins and needles whether it's going to make another new highs in the market. That's potential, and of course it could be the opposite too. Mm-hmm.
So the markets have kind of come down and are sitting right across those trend lines, and a big down day that closes 2 days in a row could signal more downside potential. But the supplies are too tight for it to be long term. I still think that we're going to have good prices through and good opportunities. I wouldn't necessarily say better, but we'll continue to have great opportunities. So just be watching the markets and make sure that you do something.
That's right. Last week's guest, Chris Sealer, says, just don't watch them. You have to do something to take advantage of them. Well, that's really good. This past week was Ag Week, and of course there was one day, a salute to women in agriculture, and we put up a video on that. We also had a special video to farmers in general, which is both male and female. And we hope that you check that out. But, we are so blessed in this country that, other than last spring when we were at the height of the pandemic, and that's when it kind of hit home how important farmers are when you went to the grocery store and the meat was all gone, or certain things were in the food area that you normally take for granted were gone. We kind of thought about this whole process. And I hope during Ag Week that's what we do. We think about farmers and what they do. They're very, very special, unique folks. If you go back in history, all the way to South America to the Aztecs, and any country or civilization that could raise corn was always highly successful. In other words, the fact that we have farmers that can produce so well here in the United States, it allows others to do other things. Everybody was a farmer way back when. We were all subsistence folks. In other words, we went out and lived off the land, literally. But when farmers came in professionally, in the countries that could raise corn, that meant they could store up bushels of corn that would last not only this crop year, but even into the next crop year for generations, or not for generations, but for multiple years. So in other words, famine didn't affect the population. So we're very blessed. And, if you look at the United States, you look at all the farmland that we have, we are the envy of the world. We have a nice Atlantic Ocean on one side. We have the Gulf of Mexico on the south side, and in between we have the Ohio and the Mississippi and Missouri River. Makes the transportation of our farm products, grains and soybeans, very easily, and for exports. And we have adequate amount of energy in this country. So the United States is a very, very strong country. And then I know also our currency is very, very stable. So it puts us in a huge advantage over the rest of the world. So we salute the American farmer. And, I have a saying, when you're driving down the road and you see that slow-moving vehicle up there and you're in a big hurry, never cuss a farmer with your mouth full, is what I say. So thank you, American farmers, for allowing us to be able to do other things, or otherwise we'd be running around looking for our next meal. And we're so fortunate to have you that we have a lot of supply of good, high-quality, safe food.
Speaking of Ag Week, before your corny joke, Joe, you had a pretty special interview this past Friday, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I got a call from Paul Dennison from KILJ Radio in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, and his granddaughter, Katie. And they asked me to come up because for a special radio show on Ag Week. But I wasn't the special guest. It was Secretary Vilsack, and he is from Mount Pleasant. So Paul has a relationship with him. So we have that interview, and we will link to it if you want to listen to it. But I think it was a great tribute to farmers and what he's doing to and where we're headed with agriculture and what the USDA is doing. And he also talked about what are all the things that the USDA does. It's more than just farming. It touches a lot of areas. And then he also talked about some of the statistics and different things that how productive our American farmers are. So it's a great interview. Listen to it, and it was a great honor to be on a radio interview with Secretary Vilsack from our Southeast Iowa home base. So that brings us to the Corny Joke. Today's Corny Joke is brought to you by Jeff Ranks. He's our dealer in Shell Rock, Iowa, and he stopped by and picked up some seed, came in my office and sent this to me. He said he thought I could use some help, and I totally agree. That some of the stuff I've been putting out has been a little bit subpar. So Jeff gave us one that you can tell your grandkids and your children. So this one here, if you remember quite a few years ago what it was going on, there was a lot of elephant jokes out there, This one here is, why did the elephant paint his toenails red? Why did the elephant paint his toenails red? So he could hide in the strawberry patch. Now, you may think that's a little bit ridiculous, but have you ever seen an elephant in a strawberry patch? Works pretty good, doesn't it? Thanks, Jeff. We appreciate your support and appreciate the joke. If anybody else has corny jokes and want to send them in, we'd sure appreciate it. But I hope you found this week's episode beneficial. I know we're just so thankful for our American farmers, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Please take care.